The life of Empress Joséphine. Although she is often referred to as Joséphine de Beauharnais, it is not a name she herself used. Beauharnais is the name of her first husband, which she ceased to use upon her marriage to Napoleon, taking the last name Bonaparte. And she did not use the name Joséphine before meeting Napoleon, who was the first to call her such, perhaps from her middle name, Joseph. Before she met Napoleon, she went by the name of Rose, or Marie-Rose Tasche de la Pagerie, later de Beauharnais. She sometimes reverted to using her maiden name in later life. After her marriage to then General Bonaparte, she adopted the name Joséphine Bonaparte. The misnomer Joséphine de Beauharnais emerged during the restoration of the Bourbons, who were hesitant to refer to her by either Napoleon's surname or her imperial title. Marie-Joseph Rose Tasche de la Pagerie was born in Les Troisselets, Martinique, to a wealthy French family who owned a sugarcane plantation, which is now a museum. The Tasches were an ancient French family of country gentry, and Joséphine's grandfather, Gaspard Joseph, was the first to settle in Le Carbet on Martinique in 1726. He seems to have lived in poverty there, but secured a position as a page for his son, Joseph Gaspard, in the household of the Dauphine of France, Maria Josepha of Saxony. After spending 3 years from 1752 in France, Joseph Gaspard returned to Martinique and married Rose Claire des Vergers de Sanois. Rose Claire was from one of the oldest European families on the plantation, and the Tasche family home near Les Troisselets was part of her dowry. Joséphine was their first child, and they had 2 more, Catherine Désirée in 1764 and Marie Françoise in 1766. Joseph Gaspard earned his living as a plantation owner and a lieutenant of the Troupes de Marine, apart from a small pension for his work in the royal household. He was almost always close to bankruptcy and suffered from ill health. Joséphine was raised by an enslaved nurse called Marion, whose freedom she would secure in 1807. At the age of 10, she and Catherine Désirée were sent to a boarding school in Fort Royal, run by the Benedictines de la Providence. There, they learned to read, write, sing, dance, and embroider for 4 years. After the death of Catherine Désirée, Joséphine returned to her parents' plantation. Joséphine's paternal aunt, Marie-Euphemie Désirée Renaudin, was the mistress of a French naval officer, François de Beauharnais, from a less ancient but richer noble family. While living on Martinique, de Beauharnais had a son, Alexandre, by his wife. Soon, the parents returned to France and left the infant with the Tasche family until 1766. When he had come of age, his father's mistress, who was also Alexandre's godmother, decided that it would be advantageous to her if he married one of her nieces. Age 17, he judged 15-year-old Joséphine to be too close to him in age, and thus, Catherine Désirée was chosen for him. As the bride's father was impoverished and the bridegroom was to become a wealthy man upon his marriage, he asked for no dowry. By the time Alexandre's father had proposed in a letter, however, Catherine Désirée had died. Not wanting to lose the rich suitor, her father offered his youngest daughter instead, which was accepted by Alexandre. Marie Françoise was not yet 12, however, and her mother and grandmother were not willing to let her go. In the end, Joséphine was engaged to Alexandre. In October 1779, she went to France with her father. She married Alexandre on the 13th of December, 1779, in Noisy-le-Grand. They had 2 children, a son, Eugene de Beauharnais, and a daughter, Hortense de Beauharnais, who later married Napoleon's brother Louis Bonaparte in 1802. Joséphine and Alexandre's marriage was not a happy one. Alexandre abandoned his family for over a year to live with a mistress and frequented brothels. leading to a court-ordered separation during which Joséphine and the children lived at Alexandra's expense in the Pentamont Abbey. On the 2nd of March, 1794, during the Reign of Terror, the Committee of Public Safety ordered the arrest of her husband. He was jailed in the Carmes prison in Paris. Her husband was accused of having poorly defended mines in July 1793, and being considered an aristocratic suspect, was sentenced to death and guillotined with his cousin Augustine on the 23rd of July, 1794, on the Place de la Révolution. Considering Joséphine as too close to the counter-revolutionary financial circles, the committee ordered her arrest on the 18th of April, 1794. A warrant of arrest was issued against her on the 21st of April, 1794, and she was imprisoned in the Carmes prison until the 28th of July. During this time, Joséphine was only allowed to communicate with her children by their scrawls on the laundry list, which the jailers soon prohibited. Joséphine was freed 5 days later, thanks to the fall and execution of Robespierre, which ended the Reign of Terror. On the 27th of July, 1794, Talleyrand arranged the liberation of Thérèse Cabarrus, and soon after that of Joséphine. In June 1795, a new law allowed her to recover the possessions of Alexandra. Madame de Beauharnais had affairs with several leading political figures, including Paul-François Jean-Nicolas Barras. In 1795, she met Napoleon Bonaparte, 6 years her junior, and became his mistress. In a letter to her in December, he wrote, "I awake full of you. Your image and the memory of last night's intoxicating pleasures has left no rest to my senses." In January 1796, Napoleon Bonaparte proposed to her, and they were married on the 9th of March. On the marriage certificate, Joséphine reduced her age by 4 years and increased Napoleon's by 18 months, making the newlyweds appear to be roughly the same age. The marriage was not well received by Napoleon's family, who were shocked that he had married an older widow with 2 children. His mother and sisters were especially resentful of Joséphine, as they felt clumsy and unsophisticated in her presence. Joséphine, left behind in Paris, in 1796 began an affair with a handsome hussar lieutenant, Hippolyte Charles. Rumors of the affair reached Napoleon. He was infuriated, and his love for her changed entirely. In 1798, Napoleon led a French army to Egypt. During this campaign, Napoleon started an affair of his own with Pauline Force, the wife of a junior officer who became known as Napoleon's Cleopatra. The relationship between Joséphine and Napoleon was never the same after this. In December 1800, Joséphine was nearly killed in the plot of the Rue Saint-Nicaise, an attempt on Napoleon's life with a bomb planted in a parked cart. On the 24th of December, she and Napoleon went to see a performance of Joseph Haydn's creation at the opera, accompanied by several friends and family. The party traveled in 2 carriages. Joséphine was in the second, with her daughter, Hortense, her pregnant sister-in-law, Caroline Murat, and General Jean Rapp. Joséphine had delayed the party while getting a new silk shawl draped correctly, and Napoleon went ahead in the first carriage. The bomb exploded as her carriage was passing. The bomb killed several bystanders and one of the carriage horses, and blew out the carriage's windows. Hortense was struck in the hand by flying glass. There were no other injuries, and the party proceeded to the opera. Napoleon was elected Emperor of the French in 1804, making Joséphine Empress. The coronation ceremony, officiated by Pope Pius VII, took place at Notre Dame de Paris on December 2nd. Napoleon first crowned himself, then put the crown on Joséphine's head, proclaiming her empress. This showed his rejection of the clergy as the power of Europe. In her role as empress, Napoleon had a court appointed to her and reinstated the offices which composed the household of the Queen before the French Revolution, with Adelaide de la Rochefoucauld as Première Dame d'Honneur, Emily de Beauharnais as Dame d'Atta, and the wives of his own officials and generals, Jean-Charlotte du Lucry, Madame de Remusat, Elizabeth Baud de Talhuet, Lauriston, d'Arbourg, Marie-Antoinette Duchatel, Sophie de Ségur, Siran, Colbert, Savary and Aglaé-Louise Orgy. Nay, as Dame de Palais. Shortly before their coronation, there was an incident at the Château de Saint Cloud that nearly sundered the marriage between the two. Joséphine caught Napoleon in the bedroom of her lady-in-waiting, Elizabeth de Vordy, and Napoleon threatened to divorce her as she had not produced an heir. Eventually, however, through the efforts of her daughter Hortense, the two were reconciled. When after a few years it became clear she could not have a child, Napoleon, while still loving Joséphine, began to think about the possibility of an annulment. His final die was cast when Napoleon's nephew Napoleon Charles Bonaparte, who had been declared his heir, died of croup in 1807. Napoleon began to create lists of eligible princesses. At dinner on the 30th of November, 1809, he let Joséphine know that, in the interest of France, he must find a wife who could produce an heir. Joséphine agreed to the divorce so the emperor could remarry in the hope of having an heir. The divorce ceremony took place on the 10th of January, 1810, and was a grand but solemn social occasion, and each read a statement of devotion to the other. On the 11th of March, Napoleon married Marie-Louise of Austria by proxy. The formal ceremony took place at the Louvre in April. Napoleon once remarked that despite her quick infatuation with him, "It is a womb that I am marrying." Even after their separation, Napoleon insisted Joséphine retain the title of Empress. "It is my will that she retain the rank and title of Empress, and especially that she never doubt my sentiments, and that she ever hold me as her best and dearest friend." After the divorce, Joséphine lived at the Château de Malmaison, near Paris. She remained on good terms with Napoleon, who once said that the only thing to come between them was her debts. Eventually, in April 1810, by letters patent, Napoleon eventually created her Duchess of Navarre in honor of the love and respect he still felt for her. In March 1811, Marie-Louise delivered a long-awaited heir, Napoleon II, to whom Napoleon gave the title, King of Rome. 2 years later, Napoleon arranged for Joséphine to meet the young prince who had cost her so many tears. Joséphine died of pneumonia in Rueil-Malmaison on the 29th of May, 1814, soon after walking with Emperor Alexander I of Russia in the gardens of Malmaison, where she allegedly begged to join Napoleon in exile. She was buried in the nearby church of Saint-Pierre-Saint-Paul in Rueil. Napoleon learned of her death via a French journal while in exile on Elba, and stayed locked in his room for 2 days, refusing to see anyone. He claimed to a friend, while in exile on St. Helena, that "I truly loved my Joséphine, but I did not respect her." Despite numerous affairs, eventual marriage annulment, and his remarriage, the emperor's last words on his deathbed at St. Helena were, "France, the army, the head of the army, Joséphine." Joséphine's granddaughter through her son, Eugene, another Joséphine, married King Oscar I of Sweden, the son of Napoleon's one-time fiancée, Désirée Clary. Through her, Joséphine is a direct ancestor of the present heads of the royal houses of Belgium, Denmark, Luxembourg, Norway, and Sweden. Joséphine was also a dedicated botanist. In 1799, while Napoleon was in Egypt, Joséphine purchased the Château de Malmaison. She had it landscaped in an English style, hiring landscapers and horticulturalists from the United Kingdom. These included Thomas Blakey, a Scottish horticultural expert, another Scottish gardener, Alexander Howatson, the botanist, Ventenat, and the horticulturist, André Dupont. The rose garden was begun soon after purchase, inspired by Dupont's love of roses. Joséphine took a personal interest in the gardens and the roses, and learned a great deal about botany and horticulture from her staff. Joséphine wanted to collect all known roses, so Napoleon ordered his warship commanders to search all seized vessels for plants to be forwarded to Malmaison. Joséphine worked with and sought out the works of many artists throughout her lifetime. In the area of painters, she mainly was a collector of paintings, but she was painted by and worked with several artists such as Jacques-Louis David and François Gérard. However, there was one painter whom Joséphine favored and commissioned more often than others, Antoine-Jean Gros. Gros, upon hearing that Joséphine would be visiting Genoa, worked to get an introduction, knowing that the association with Joséphine would help him become more well-known. Upon meeting with Gros and seeing his work, Joséphine asked him to come back to Milan with her and to live in her residencies. Joséphine then commissioned him to create a portrait of her husband, the then General Napoleon. The work took several sittings between Gros and Napoleon and would be named General Bonaparte at the Bridge of Arcole. Over her lifetime, Joséphine commissioned for major pieces from the Italian neoclassical sculptor Antonio Canova. The Empress was given a copy of Canova's work Psyche and Cupid, which was originally promised to Colonel John Campbell, but because of unforeseen circumstances, it was gifted to Joséphine. She would commission Canova to create a sculpture, and the result would be Dancer with Hands on Hips. The work, commissioned in 1802 but was not finished until 1812, Joséphine allowed him to create on his own terms, which were based on the classics but with a more relaxed and joyful appearance. He would create several sculptures based on dancing. Dancer with Hands on Hips was praised by the art community because it was not based on any specific ancient sculpture, but with a classical spin, making it a completely original sculpture. Joséphine would commission Canova again for another sculpture called Paris. The work's plaster cast was completed in 1807, but the marble statue was not finished until 1812. Arriving in Malmaison in 1813, a year before Joséphine's death. The final sculpture that the Empress would commission was the Three Graces. This work would not be completed until after Joséphine's death in 1816. All four works were eventually sold to Tsar Alexander of Russia. Empress Joséphine was a woman like no other of her time. Narrowly escaping the revolution and avoiding the sharp blade of the guillotine, she proved to be a woman equally capable of living without the man who gave her everything. Philanthropist, intellectual and cleverly shrewd, she outlived a world drowning in political upheaval.